Congressman Cline from Virginia. Congressman, how are you, sir?
Hey, good to be with you this morning.
Good to talk to you. So if we can continue on this conversation with Israel for a minute, if you don't mind, before we get to your DEI bill. First of all, do you support giving aid to Israel?
I do. I think as the sole democracy in the Middle East fighting against global Islamic terror, we have got to support them. And so I did vote for the aid.
Okay. What do you think about Biden admitting that we're not going to give certain aid for certain things you're going to do?
Well, I think it's short-sighted and political on his part. He's trying to appease the intifada going on our college campuses, and they're not going to accept what he's offering. Ultimately, they're going to say, "Thank you, may I have another," and demand more and more from him, and he's not going to be able to accommodate them. They're, defeatists. They want Israel wiped off the map. They want Palestine hegemony over the region, and they're willing to implicitly support the Hamas effort in the process. And it's disgusting. And the Biden administration is ultimately contributing to the chaos that we're seeing over there right now. And by propping up Hamas in these negotiations, prolonging and the chaos there, and the deaths ultimately of the civilians that are resulting from Hamas using them as human shields in the process.
Is it illegal for Biden to withhold certain aid on his discretion?
Open question, because you're talking about defense armaments passed, approved by Congress, funded by Congress in the bill that he signed. Question of whether he has the right to not fund certain directives from Congress. Nixon tried that. Trump has talked about that, whether we need to fund the Department of Education when he wins. If he just says, "I'm not going to fund the Department of Education that Congress established and passed," I don't know. That's an open question, whether he has the ability to do that. I don't think the Supreme Court has been clear recently on that. So that's an open question. But I do think it's in our best interest, our nation's best interest, the world's best interest for Israel to have these offensive weapons so that they can defeat Hamas. Nobody from Hamas should be showing up to these negotiations because they should all be dead. That's ultimately what we're after. There should not be any negotiations for Hamas. There should be essentially a surrender, a meeting where we accept their surrender, where Israel accepts their surrender, rather, and Hamas is gone. That's ultimately what we should be talking about, not these negotiations about who governs in Gaza and does Hamas really, ultimately get the hostages back, eliminate Hamas. Those should be the two goals.
That's right. We'll table that. We'll get back to some calls of that in a second if you're calling in. Can we pivot to Speaker Johnson for a moment? Did you vote to table the motion to vacate the chair?
Yes, there were only about a dozen Republicans who voted not to table the motion, and some of those actually said, I'm not going to vote to get rid of Johnson. I just want to have the debate. I respect that, but I do think, debate or no debate, now is not the time to get rid of Johnson. We're going to have a discussion at the end of the year when we win the majority in the House and the Senate, who we need to advance our conservative agenda. I have problems with the bills that Johnson put together and helped shepherd through. I think it's a continuation of a lot of the establishment, for lack of a better term, the uniparty consensus. And I think we need to be a little bit bolder as we lean in on a lot of this stuff. So I think as the only Republican-led entity, by one vote, we have the House. We don't have the Senate. We don't have the White House. There needs to be a voice for conservatives. And Johnson has been that voice. I want him to continue to be that voice, but he's kind of losing that voice. He's not finding it like he used to. He's articulating much more of a middle ground, and I get it. He's trying to learn how to lead with a one-vote majority, but it's frustrating for those of us who are conservatives and would rather see a more conservative agenda put forward.
Yeah, how does it happen in general? Like, what happens in the swamp that causes someone to be like that? Take us there, because I don't get it. I don't live that life. So what's going on up there?
He ultimately is taken into rooms and given briefings and told that, for example, people will die if FISA is not extended. Well, that's not really accurate, but if it is extended and he wants to do that, then there better be a warrant requirement. And once you say it has to be extended at all costs, you lose the argument for for holding it back as leverage for a warrant requirement. And that's what we were trying to do. That's what the Freedom Caucus was trying to do, get that warrant requirement. And he ultimately sided with the intel community and voted no on that, and that lost by one vote, which was very frustrating for those of us who support the Fourth Amendment. Amazing. And support that addition of that warrant requirement.
We talked yesterday with our Washington bureau chief, and he talked about the Hassert rule. And Marjorie Taylor Greene in her motion mentioned like two, maybe three times that was violated, where a bill passed with a vast majority of Democrats and fewer Republicans, like more Republicans voted against what Speaker Johnson put forward than voted for it. That's crazy. That's really, really not it at all. How is that happening?
No, and ultimately that is a rule, an internal rule within the conference, that a majority of the majority has to support something before it hits the floor, before it gets scheduled for the floor, that has been around for a long time. And once you abandon that and say, well, we're going to let a minority of Republicans side with Democrats to pass things, as a conservative, I am very, very, I get pretty emotional when I am vehement in my opposition to that idea. As conservatives, we work to build out our majority. We are the base of the majority. We are the reason why the majority happens. And you can talk about the quote unquote majority makers who think they make the majority, but at the end of the day, they are majority. They're conservative when it suits them. They're moderate when it suits them. They kind of float between somewhere in the muddy middle. But we're the ones every day out trying to articulate the conservative agenda from which to build a movement. And when you abandon that to go in with the muddy middle and the Democrats, then you're kind of giving up on what the movement's built on.
Yeah. Congressman, we only got about 2 minutes. Sorry to bombard you with a bunch of other topics that we were in the middle of. But tell us about your bill, this diversity, equity, and inclusion bill.
Yeah, so Mike Lee and I are frustrated with what we're seeing on college campuses. We know that there's a lot of federal money flowing to our universities. So one of the ways we're going to try and shrink their ability to transfer this money, which is fungible all around to their DEI programs, is to cap and reduce the amount of reimbursements that universities get for the indirect cost of grant programs. You've got direct funding for grants. There are indirect costs that they get reimbursed for, buildings and utilities and things like that. And they abuse the hell out of it. They charge way more than they should for reimbursement for these costs. It comes out of the grant, and we have a hard time as the federal government tracking and accounting for all of these costs. So what we're going to do is cap it, shrink it, get rid of the, when you've got essentially the amount of money that these colleges and universities do, which is often more than the GDP of a lot of countries across the world. 1.8 billion among Ivy Leagues for overhead. Then they shouldn't be getting reimbursed by taxpayers for a lot of the costs and shifting it over to DEI programs.
Yeah, Columbia has an endowment of $13 billion.
Insane. I mean,
good.
The country of Estonia, a NATO nation, Harvard's endowment's more than their GDP.
Yeah. They're good. They don't need any more of our money. All right, let's get that bill passed, and let's do the low-hanging fruit here. Congressman Ben Cline from Virginia. Great to talk to you, Congressman.
Hey, thank you.